It is 6:30, so I just thought I'd hit the button.
Okay, thank you. So welcome, everybody. This is our spring general meeting for the Larkspur neighborhood. We generally try to have two kind of general topic meetings per year, one in the spring and one in the fall. This year we are, or this spring we're talking about fire and water. So we're talking about fire resiliency, fire preparedness, because this is a place that gets fire issues. And we had hoped to also include somebody who was going to talk about evacuation procedures. The person who is going to be speaking may be able to cover some of those questions. And if you have questions about that we don't get covered, we will try to, well, we're recording this, and so that we'll be able to review this and see if we can get responses to any of those questions and post them on our webpage afterwards, if we can't answer them tonight. The general procedure here is going to be that we will conduct this like a webinar. So that will mean that if you are viewing this from a computer with a camera, we're asking you to have your camera off and your audio muted, and so that speakers won't have miscellaneous dogs barking and other sorts of interruptions that we've all experienced in these sorts of meetings. Without further ado, I will start out by introducing our board. I am the current chair of the board. My name is Sue Sullivan. I've actually been on the board for almost 9 years. And so I'm the person who kind of coordinates what happens. I used to do land use for this group, but now somebody else is doing land use. And I'm the one who is kind of the main contact for the neighborhood. I'd like to have each of the board members briefly introduce themselves. Molly, next.
Hi, thanks, Sue. I'm Molly McDowell. I've been on the board, gosh, for a year now, I think. Maybe it's flown by very fast, but a short year. Yeah, I suppose vice chair, so I kind of do a little bit of everything, but mostly I do a lot of the web work, website work, and posting to our blog, and trying to keep everybody up to date with all the good information happening. So I've lived in Bend for 17 years, but I've lived in the Larkspur neighborhood now for just 3 years. So I love this side of town, and I'm happy to be part of this association. So thank you.
And Kelsey.
Yeah, hi, my name is Kelsey Greer. I am the board secretary and treasurer. And I joined the Larkspur board, I think just about a year ago, after jumping on a meeting from one of the postcards that many of you received in the mail. So yeah, I've been in Larkspur for a year. I moved here from Portland like so many other folks. And yeah, I'm really excited to be a part of this community.
And Catherine.
Hi, my name is Catherine. I am the land use chair here, and part of my role is to attend meetings that are related to developments happening in the Larkspur neighborhood. And I also receive notices about any developments that are happening within 500 feet of our neighborhood as well. And I present that and any information about land use and relevant goings on about in the neighborhood to our board and you all. That's it for me.
Okay, thank you. How about Marty?
Here we go. I'm using both the my tablet and the computer, so I keep confusing which hand to use. I take care of membership, so if you know of anybody that wants to sign up for our mailings, send them to the membership. What is the email? I'll have to put it in the chat.
Okay.
Yeah, I send out those MailChimp mailings, and just really impressed this year, having jumped in to help out with the board, just how this board is taking the bull by the horns and actually getting things done. So it's fun being a part of this.
Thank you. Okay, Kristen.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Kristen Wills. I'm communications co-chair. I help with communications, obviously, a little social media and emails. I've lived in Bend for 14 years, and I've lived in the Larkspur neighborhood for 10 years. I live right off the Larkspur Trail. So I really love our neighborhood, and thanks for joining us today.
Diane.
Hi, everybody. I'm Diane Berry. I am the transportation chair. I have lived in Deschutes County for 4 years and lived in Larkspur for 2 years now. And I focus on issues that relate to the safety, the walkability, the bikeability of our neighborhood, and our current focus on trying to enhance some safety improvements with regard to intersections in our neighborhood.
Thank you. We have one other board member, Morgan Schmidt. She was unable to participate tonight because of a conflict, and she is our representative on the Neighborhood Leadership Alliance. And actually, there's a NLA meeting today. I'm not sure if that was her conflict or something else. She's the one. It's a mayor-appointed position where representatives from all different neighborhoods participate in a panel and serve as an advisory to the city council. Okay, so that's our board. We have a few announcements and things about upcoming events. So we'll get into that. First of all, Diane is going to talk a little bit about a project we've been working on, which has been advocacy for some safety improvements along Pettigrew, and also about speed signs. So Diane, you want to talk about that?
Okay. One of our goals for this year was to try to enhance the safety of Pettigrew Road, which, as anybody who has driven, walked, or biked it knows, it is not very safe. So we were looking at a lot of options, and there are no current plans or funding for making any major improvements on Pettigrew in any of the bonds or the plans that are going on with the city. So we've been in touch with Janet Ruby and Robin from the city, and they've attended our April meeting, and we've been in communication with them. And Janet provided a number of different options for us to help improve the safety of the Larkspur, or the Pettigrew Road. The city is actually planning to collect a new count. The current count was in 2019 that there were 6,000 vehicles a day, and there was no peak time. They kind of came and went throughout the day, and that meant it was managing as it was designated to be a collector road, and it was servicing that adequately. It could have a count of up to 14,000 and still be considered a collector and not need any major improvements. But they're going to do a new count and see if the numbers have increased or not, and will get back with us with regard to that data and the speed data, because we've noticed, especially Molly, but all of us have noticed people traveling very fast. And I know I have walked along the side of that road and felt like I was taking my life in my hands. So one of our goals for this year has been to try to improve the safety on that particular road. Pettigrew has already been added to the double yellow striping program for 2022, meaning I believe that means that you should not be able to pass on that road. So they're going to be striping that soon, but we don't have a date. There's also a pedestrian crossing at American Lane and Broster House in the 2022 construction project. So that's in the works. So she provided us with some other options. One of the potential options was possibly making it one way temporarily until they could get the funding to make some significant improvements to the road. And after their first look, they decided that really wasn't the best option for a number of reasons, because it really was serving its purpose as a collector, and they didn't want to inconvenience the neighborhood to any great extent. But she thought that they might be able to consider making it a one-way road as a pilot project, trying it for a couple of months and just see how people felt about it, whether that would reduce the traffic, and then making the other lane a walking, biking lane. So there would be the opportunity for pedestrians and bicyclists to use that as well. We don't know if that's going to happen, but one of the things we're going to do is we're going to put a lot of the options she offered to us into a survey format. We'll make that available on our website, and probably we'll send it out to you via email or something as well. And we're going to have a pretty comprehensive list, and you can give us your feedback on the options that you think would be best. Others are improving some other intersections. They can't obviously improve make a bike path or a walking path along the side of the road because there's no money for that. But there may be some other options where they can improve crosswalks, making other routes more appealing and easier to cross. So we'll be getting that out. We're working on it now. We've got some preliminary ideas put together. Molly is our genius when it comes to making surveys, and she gets that all put together really quickly. We just need to get it in some kind of a cohesive form so she has something to work with, and then you'll all be receiving it. So please watch for that, and please give us your feedback. And if you have any other ideas, the only issue we have here is that they don't have a lot of money to do anything. So the options that we're going to put in the survey are the ones she gave to us as the most cost effective and things they could probably afford to do. The other thing that they do is they have a speed sign program. We already submitted a request for a speed sign. It's not going to be a permanent one. Generally, it lasts a few weeks, I believe, but we already submitted a request for having a speed sign on Pettigrew, hopefully in the location of the farm, because that seems to encourage people to go fast. I don't know if they feel like they're in a rural area and they can increase their speed at that location or what, but we've requested that that location be a location of a speed sign. If you have any other streets or intersections that you would like to see a speed sign, please let me know and I can submit that on your behalf if you would like. And my email is transportation.larkspurna@gmail.com. You can shoot me an email and I'd be happy to submit that for you. Other than that, that pretty much takes care of it, but keep an eye out for our survey because we would love to have your input.
Thank you very much. And just to make sure that people are clear on it. So we're talking about a temporary speed radar sign. It's one of these mobile ones. It either will attach to an existing speed limit sign, or it will be on this little cart that they park by side of the road. And they usually leave it for 2 or 3 weeks. And it is for raising people's awareness of speeds more so than enforcement. But I think many people drive on that road just unconsciously go fast just because it's a road that feels like you can go fast. And so trying to raise awareness on that is part of this issue. So that's the kind of speed radar sign we're talking about. And we will have the ability to submit other locations in the neighborhood. And so if you know of one, please let us know. Okay, so the next topic that we want to give you a little update on is neighborhood cleanup efforts. And we've got an upcoming Bend beautification project as well. So Kelsey, you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I can talk about what we've done so far, and then maybe Sue, you want to jump in more on the upcoming part. A neighbor about a month or so ago, Emily, she reached out to us with the hopes of doing a cleanup in her neighborhood because she noticed that it was deteriorating over time and the trash was piling up and she wanted to do something about it. So she took the initiative to reach out to the city, and they have what they call a Bend. It's like the Bend beautification project, where you can essentially check out like the trash grabbers and trash bags and vests and gather a group of people on your own and use their resources to kind of go out and do your own neighborhood cleanup. I believe that you can have up to 10 per group. But that might be changing as well. They just revamped their whole website and the project requirements a little bit, so that might have changed. But the great part about that is that they will come and pick up the trash after you've done your cleanup effort. So we did it a few weeks ago and had a group over by the stadium, the baseball stadium. that's where we focused our efforts. And it's like bright yellow trash bags, and we just tied them up and left them on different corners. And so they were obvious. And then the city came by and picked them up. And we were out there for about 2 hours. And I think we got about 12 bags of trash. So, and I think there was about 8 to 10 of us out picking up. So it was actually a really fun kind of day. I got to know a lot of neighbors that I had never met before. It's not really the neighborhood or the part of the neighborhood that I live in, but it's nice to kind of get out and see different parts and help out. So we're hoping to spearhead another effort. And so I can let Sue talk about that. But if there's something that you're interested in doing closer to home for you, just let us know and we'd be happy to help you get that organized or point you in the right direction.
Yeah, okay, so there's a citywide effort going on May 21st. It's the Let's Pull Together effort. And so it's a combination of picking up debris and also some weed pulling of invasive weeds. And there are going to be focus areas around the city. And there's a sign up through the City of Bend website. And we also have it, I believe, on our webpage, and it's on Facebook and a couple of other places. So if you're interested in that and you don't have the information to sign up, you fire an email off to one of us, and we'd be happy to help connect you with that. In addition, a neighborhood cleanup effort similar to what Kelsey just talked about. We're talking about organizing near the Water Church off of Bear Creek Road. And that little pocket neighborhood, a couple of neighbors have brought up issues because of debris collecting along the COID easement that goes through that property near the church. And so we're still kind of in the works and trying to we've contacted COID and they're fine with it. Part of the property is also associated with the church, so we want to get permission from them. So until we get all that worked out, we haven't got a date yet. So if you're interested in that, I guess that's another stay tuned, and we'll have more information on that at some point. Okay, so the next topic is the Bend Food Project, and Leanne Roberts, who's a member of our neighborhood, has a little bit she wants to talk about with that. So Leanne, take it away.
You can see me. Hi. Thank you. I'm Leanne Roberts, and I've lived in Larkspur neighborhood for about 7 years, and in Bend for about 22 years. So I just recently retired, and I started volunteering for the Bend Food Project. And what they do is collect food for the Giving Plate, which then distributes or makes available food to people in need. And I think you had added the link to the Bend Food Project and the Giving Plate onto the itinerary here. But basically what I am is a neighborhood coordinator, and I pass out, I'm going to show you the little green bag. Maybe you've seen these before, but the green bags, and to anybody that would like to be a donor, I would bring you a bag, and every 2 months, so it's not super often, it's every other month, you would fill up the bag with non-perishable food items, and I would provide you a list of what items they like to collect, but it does need to be non-perishable. And you would just fill the bag up, and on the designated date, I just pick the bag up from you, and you just leave it outside at your door. So you don't even have to be home. You could just leave it there. And I leave you a new bag for next time. And basically, I just stay in touch with everyone by email to let them know any pertinent information, what dates the pickup dates are, a notification afterwards about how much food's been collected. And basically it's pretty simple, but I mainly working in the Larkspur neighborhood and trying to get as many people possible to be a part of the program. So if anyone is interested in being a donor or even a coordinator, you can contact me, and my email address was listed. It's we design bendnet.com. And anyway, I just can answer any questions if everyone has any more questions or wants to be a volunteer. I'd appreciate it.
And I think there are other volunteers also in the neighborhood that are coordinating. I think, Diane, I think you mentioned that you are as well, right?
Yes, I am, and I know there's at least a couple others in the Larkspur neighborhood, so we are
Good.
well represented.
That's good. Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
large neighborhood, so to have more
Welcome.
coordinators
Nan.
is good. Thank
Yes,
you.
it's really good. Very good.
Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you. Okay, so next on our agenda is the fire resilience topic, and I am hoping that Trish Connolly from Bend Fire is available here. Are you
I'm
on? Yes, you
here.
are. Very
Let me turn
good.
on my camera.
Very good. And if you have information to share, you can share your screen and Molly can set you up to be able to do that. So
Yeah, I do have a PowerPoint. So can you guys see that?
No, but you should be able to share your screen though now.
Hold on. I thought, oh, right, here we go. Well, before I do that, I just want to introduce myself. My name's Trish Conley. I'm Deputy Chief with Bend Fire and Rescue. And I want to say I'm so impressed with your group and everything you guys have going on as a neighborhood. I'm sitting here listening, being like, this is fantastic. So thanks for letting me come and talk to you about this. And we're, as you said, we're going to talk a little bit about wildfire resiliency, what you guys can be doing in your neighborhood. This is May is Wildfire Awareness Month. So this is perfect timing. And let me see if I can share my screen. Okay, you guys are going to see yourselves for a second. Here we go. How's that?
Nothing yet.
No? Huh. Okay, let me try this again. Is that good?
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, thanks you guys. We use a different, we don't use Zoom. So it's a little bit different for me when I do this. Let me go back. Oh. Hold on, this kind of went ahead, back. Okay, here we go, you guys. So what I'm going to talk to you about is a campaign we started calling, is called Own Your Zone. And this is a wildfire preparedness campaign. We developed it to empower communities and give them tools so they could create defensible spaces around their home. And we really tried to give people really simple things to do and continue to say the same thing so people really could absorb the information. I think sometimes so many things are coming at people, and so we really wanted to say the same things that people can do, and the goal is that homeowners can do this in one weekend. Okay, so some people don't know that embers can travel up to 1 mile ahead of a fire. And 50% of home ignitions come from wildland fires and from the embers from these wildland fires. So oftentimes people think it's like they imagine this wall of fire, and that's really not the case. It's these embers that get thrown up in front of a fire, and they find somewhere to propagate, either on a home, on a house, or near a house, and then that starts getting going. And so what we want to do is teach people how to clean up around their house. So if we do happen to have a wildland fire in or near Bend and embers are falling, that those embers aren't able to propagate and start a fire. So if you do these simple actions, the goal is that these embers can't get the fire going, because once it can get going, and if it starts one house, then it can start several houses. So what you do around your own home, like to say, can save your neighbor's house and possibly your neighborhood. So let's talk about the zones. One thing about this campaign that was a little bit different is oftentimes when you talk about the zones, you see one house and then all this open land, and really wanted to talk about neighborhoods. And so we wanted to make designs so you could see one house, and then there's zone 1, which you guys can see, it's 0 to 5 feet around your home. And that's the most important zone, and we'll get talking more about that. Zone 2 is 5 to 30 feet. And then zone 3, which most of us don't have because our neighborhoods are 30 to 100 feet. We kind of wanted to show you what that looks like. And then we also had this view. So most people don't have that larger part. So let's talk about zone 1. So zone 1, like I said, is that space that's 0 to 5 feet around your home. And this is the most important of all the zones. And the reason is because it's right up against your house. So if an ember can fall and get going right near your home, that's a really good chance it also can get your home started. One of our fire prevention people said, and I really like this concept, he's like, I'd like to tell people to step outside your house and then turn around and look at your house and think, if the fire department couldn't be here to put water on my home and there were embers falling, do I think they could get going? And so that's something so what we try to do is give you things you could do where those embers can't get going. 1 is to clean your roofs and gutters of pine needles and leaves. 2 is trim branches that touch your roof. 3 is remove any of that flammable vegetation that's right against your home. 4, if you have bark mulch that comes straight up against your home, think about replacing that with a non-combustible material. And then if anybody has firewood, and I'm not sure in your neighborhood if you have this, but if they have firewood that's stacked up against their home or on their deck, it's time to move it away. And I have a couple of, this is my own home. I made my husband get up there and get these pine needles off the roof. So you can see, I'm like, give me a before and after. Here's before and after. So in getting those gutters as well, clearing that roof off. Here's what I'm talking about with the bark mulch. Luckily they have this brick, but you can see we go on bark mulch fires all the time, and they get going and they can burn right up against your house. And we've had fires start on homes because of bark mulch. So just be aware of that. And here's a very poor blurry picture of a branch on a roof. And so just really trimming your trees around your home so it's not on your roof is really important. So that's zone 1. And that really should be something that people can do quickly in one day, and just look around their home and those 5 things. Here's zone 2, which is 5 feet to 30 feet. So this is further out. Pretty much this is, if you live in a neighborhood, this is the extent of your zones. And this one is to prune limbs and trees. We just had that done in our house last year. So just pruning those limbs up on your trees, cutting dead grass and weeds that may be around your property, and removing some vegetation under your trees. Because if an ember can fall on that vegetation and get going, it can burn straight up that tree. So here's a little picture of really getting rid of that dead grass and weeds, and you can see how the second picture is much better. And then the third zone, which most of us don't have, is just breaking up continuous fuels. And so you don't have these ladder fuels where something can get going in one zone and then travel across someone's property. And I do have sort of this picture there so you can see what I'm talking about. Continuous fuels, but this is also cleaning up under trees, so something can't get going in that underbrush and then start moving into the trees. So that is our Own Your Zone. But I also, because you're here, I want to talk to you about things you can do also, which is sign up for a Deschutes alerting system. This will let you know if there's an emergency in your neighborhood, and it's not necessarily wildland fire, it can be any emergency. So you go in there and they're going to ask for information and your cell phone number. And so what happens is if there's an issue in your neighborhood, you're going to get a text. This is, if you see on the left, that's exactly what the text will look like. Get ready, evacuation notice. This is what's happening. And this is a really easy way to get information. And then I just wanted to remind people of the evacuation levels. That level 1 is ready. So ready, set, and go. And ready is something that we should be at all times, regardless. And that's just knowing where your valuables are, knowing what you'd want to bring with you if something should happen, knowing how to quickly get your medications, maybe having a little spot where you have extra dog food, or if you have pets, something that you can grab, even having a to-go bag if you wanted to, but something so you know what you want to grab and where that is. Set is when something's happening and they're like, okay, now it's time to be a little more serious about it. So monitor your social media networks, the news. If you do this reverse 911 or the Deschutes Alerts, this is fantastic because you can get information. It's set, you can load some of that up into your car. And then go is when you just leave. And like you said, those evacuation routes. This is another really great thing the city of Bend did, as they started podcasts. Our fire chief just gave one called Wildfire Safety. That was the latest podcast. You can go on to, if you have, you can go on to Apple Podcasts and search Inside Bend and pull it up. You can also get on the City of Bend's website and pull up the podcast and listen. He gave a really great one just this last time. They interviewed me. I was the very first podcast they did, and I talked about Own Your Zone campaign. So I would completely believe you guys check it out. It's really great information, and it's information about the entire city. And here's other resources I wanted to let you guys know about. One is Own Your Zone. So you can get on www.ownyourZoneBend.org and pull that up and see what I said in each zones. This is a perfect time right now to do your yard work because Fire Free is going on. So now until May 15th, any yard work you do, bring it to not landfill, and it's free to dump. So this is a perfect time to do your spring cleanup. Here's again Deschutes Alerts, so you can get that reverse 911. And then for those who want to read a more in-depth plan, our wildfire protection plan, projectwildfire.org has the latest wildfire protection plan for our area. I'd completely recommend getting that and reading it. You also can sign up, text co-fire to this number here that I have to receive wildfire and prescribed burn information. So if there's, and we're getting into that season where we're going to have a lot of prescribed burns. So this could be really good to know when you see that column, you know that it's just a prescribed burns. And then Deschutes County website has great education and information. Red Cross also does for your wildland preparedness. And I think, you guys, that's it.
Chris, thank you so much. I have a couple questions in the chat.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, how far up should trees be trimmed?
Oh, you know, that's a really good question. I would say 5 to 6 feet is good. I think that will be just fine. Just if you look at it and make sure the branches aren't swinging down. And so ours is trimmed quite a bit. I think ours is trimmed about 12 feet up, but I'd say anywhere 6 feet
Okay.
would be great.
Thanks. And another question about trees. You know, we live with lots of large ponderosas and junipers in our yards.
Yeah.
How much of an issue are those trees in terms of embers flying up a mile away?
You know, I have a ton of pine trees in my home in my yard as well. And here's the thing, we can't completely 100% say no embers can propagate, but if those trees limbs aren't hitting your roof, if you've trimmed them up, if you don't have huge clumps of the trees, I think we are doing a great job of protecting our home and neighborhood.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
think that's all for the questions in the chat.
Okay. Well, I really appreciate you guys letting me drop in and talk. If you have any other questions, feel free to call the fire department, and appreciate it. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Trish.
Okay, take care, you guys. I'm gonna pop off if that's okay.
Thank
Okay,
you.
Thank
Thank
you.
Okay, so next on our agenda is water-wise and water conservation topics. And perhaps Molly, you can introduce the people who are involved here. I think you had some working relationship with them.
Sure, yeah, Daniel Denyon with the City of Bend Water Utilities Department. He's the go-to for the water conservation. And I don't know, Dan, if that particularly in landscapes and the outdoor use or all in general, your focus, but water conservation, yeah.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. My name is Dan Denning. As Molly said, I'm the water conservation manager for the City of Bend. We do all things water conservation, so indoors with a focus on outdoors, our utility internal efficiency efforts, which we can talk about here in a little bit. I believe I had our water ops manager, Rod Mingus, was going to join us. And so he may pop on here in a little bit, but I can go ahead and get started if everybody's ready. All right, let me share my screen here. All right. Sorry, folks. We use Teams at work, and so I have to relearn how to do Zoom and bounce back and forth. But can everybody see that WaterWise tips screen up there? Awesome. Okay.
Yep.
Looks good.
So waterwisetips.org, that's for a lack of a better brand, that's the name of our program, the WaterWise program, but it also happens to be our website. So we are going to go through a rebranding process here in the next year as we have an increased focus on conservation in the city. But for now, that's where you can find most of our programs and outreach materials. So we'll start with just kind of an update of what we've been up to in the utility department and in our program. So we just finished our integrated water master plan, which is our engineering exercise. It took about 1.5 years. So that's where we're looking at, future demands, future infrastructure needs within the city, our water sources, and we integrate our conservation program and benchmarks into that to look at how much infrastructure or water conservation could offset. So in that, we looked at, population increases, our water sources, and it showed us that, for the next 20 years, this is the span of time we're looking out, that our sources could handle and meet our projected demands. So that's looking at, proposed development that's happening now that was, approved, 2 to 5 years ago. And so part of that, and we can talk about it a little bit next, is our water management and conservation plan, which is our requirement by the state as a water service provider to practice conservation, and look at internal efficiency as well as offsetting demands. After that, something that we don't normally do, but we did this year, was we engaged with our ECC, our Environmental Climate Committee. So they're involved with our CAP program, our Climate Action Plan. And we spent 3 months presenting to them, giving them the history on our program, what we do, looking for policy level suggestions on where we should head with our program in the next couple of years as we start implementing the things that came out of this water master plan. And then in general, especially, important in these drought years, is we just continue to be a partner in the regional basin collaborative. So working with irrigation districts, COBA, and associated groups. This is just a little bit of kind of an outline of water use within the basin. So if we look at, all the cities and the municipalities in the basin at, 40,000 acre feet, we're about 2% of the water use within the basin. It's not surprising, but that's how, the numbers kind of weigh out. Luckily, there's lots of good things going on within the basin with the water banking and that sort of thing that will help out, our other collaborators and partners within the basin this year. And then just a general overview of our system. So our baseline water use, we have generally two sources. I would say we have our surface water that comes out of the Bridge Creek watershed from Prowell Springs. So up towards Broken Top and Tumalo Falls. That's our surface water source that's then treated in our filtration plant, which is up off of Skyliners, and then that's gravity fed down into the city. So little to no energy cost there. Generally clean water. The filtration plant just basically helps us in an event of turbidity or things that had happened with like the Bridge Creek fire in the past. So that handles our baseline usage. In the summer months, as irrigation systems turn on, we have to supplement with, we've got 20 groundwater wells throughout town. And so in order to meet the demands of landscape irrigation, we don't serve any golf courses. We don't serve a lot of parks. So like Drake Park, Farewell Bend Park, they all have river water rights or their own well rights. So this is strictly like single family residential or commercial landscape irrigation. So we operate those wells April through October to meet those demands. And then just, the outlook for this year and for the past 2 years, really. I'm sure you're all hearing about it in the news. Really low reservoir levels to start off the year. So that's really kind of hurting the agricultural community. And then just, being part of in Central Oregon, we are affected by drought. So I think this is the second year at least that we've been in extreme drought. And so we are looking forward and enhancing our conservation efforts and paying close attention to our sources as we move through this summer season. Luckily, I'm ready for warm weather, but with this nice cold front we got in this last storm system, it really did help us. I think going into it in April, we were at like 76% of median for our precipitation in the basin. And so now I think we're up to like 97% of median. So we really did get a considerable amount of precipitation in the form of snow over the last couple of weeks. We're just hoping that it stays cool and we get a nice slow melt. But if we look at the snow water equivalent, you can see the Deschutes Basin is at 133% of median now. There's some, funky math. It's not exactly translating to, water in the rivers, but in general, that's the way they describe the snow water equivalent. The one thing you will notice, though, if you look at the time span that they're looking at that median, it's 1991 to 2020. So, you do have a drier set of years in that time period that they're taking the media or that they're comparing the median to. So But this is really our bread and butter. This is what we operate out of. Just so you guys know, in the city of Bend at the utility department, conservation is not a nice to have for us, it's required. As utilities grow to certain sizes, the requirements of their conservation efforts also grow. But this is where our regulatory compliance comes in, and how we report to the state on what we do. So like Molly said, a lot of my focus is outdoors, but there's also a lot of things internally that I'm involved with, including our annual water audit. So that's reporting on our water production, where our non-revenue water is, our meter testing program, our meter testing practices, our meter replacement, leak detection efforts, all those things that make us produce and deliver water more efficiently. If we minimize losses, in our production and delivery of water, obviously it's more equitable if we're charging the customers the correct amount with more efficient metering, et cetera. So it's a win-win for us, and we do a really good job of that. And every utility within the state does that to some extent. But again, it's scaled by the size of the utility. And then the additional portion of that is all of our conservation programs, where we have, maybe seasonal programs where we offer technical assistance, or we're doing workshops, or, we'll be doing rebates here soon. So that's kind of the additional things. As utilities grow and funds become available, they can do those additional activities. But we've got a lot of data. So we've got really good measurement in the city of Bend. We've spent a lot of money on good infrastructure, meters that take hourly reads and report to us. So we can let you know if you have leaks or constant consumption. So we have a lot of data that helps us target and focus our programs to the customers that need it. And, this is just kind of a general water year graph. And so you can see that green line in there is what composes outdoor water use. So it's about 60% of our total water produced in the city goes outdoors, and that's to landscape irrigation. So that's a huge focus for us.
Hey, Dan, I hate
Yeah.
to interrupt.
Sure.
But, 2 slides ago, you had
Yeah.
some information there. What was that the conservation-based water rate?
So the rate structure, basically they want you to bill according to water used, right? So if you think back, like prior to, I think it was like 2012 or 2014, you used to get, I think, 400 cubic feet included in your base rate, and then it would start billing volumetrically. So everything on top of that 400 cubic feet, you would get billed as you used it. In 2015, they changed that to, as soon as that first 100 cubic feet goes through, you get charged for it. So there's different levels of a rate structure. The next would be, like a tiered rate. So as you use more, the cost increases for water budget-based rates. So we are looking at those things, but we have to balance, being an enterprise fund, we have to balance those with other projects in other portions of the utility. So if we're doing huge capital improvement projects on the sewer side that's causing rate increases, we're not going to do a water rate increase and totally blow everybody's bills out of whack. So we have to kind of prioritize which part of our utilities. And when I talk about utilities, I'm talking about water, sewer, or stormwater. So that's kind of like the one water framework. We're all the utility department, but we're 3 utilities within that. And so we try to balance the rate increases to match the priority of projects. So that will probably, be something that we're going to investigate and pursue down the line. Did that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, and thanks.
Okay.
I'm trying not to interrupt, but that was one that just kind of popped up and seemed like if it was on a certain slide, we'd lose it somewhere. So I'll save all the rest of the questions to the end. Thank you.
No worries. feel free to jump in, guys, if you have questions like that. And when my mind's on track, it's easier to answer them too. So this is just another graph of the annual use, and you can see we broke it out by customer type. So those big spikes, if you notice in the calendar, are during those summer months. And so you see single family, residential, multifamily, and commercial acting pretty similar, right? Irrigation only. So all of these have irrigation use, but the irrigation only just means it's a customer, maybe like Parks, where it's a dedicated irrigation meter that just runs during the irrigation season. It doesn't handle any indoor potable use, right? So that's why that's separated out a little bit there. But those big spikes are all due to outdoor water use. So to the conservation program, I started here in 2015, and you know, we helped at the time, our utility director, Mike Bittner, was running the program. And we really worked hard to kind of build some of these programs out of pilot phases into what we call our base programs now. So these are things we offer every season. They're kind of our, you know, our go-to programs. Those are the sprinkler inspection program. Some of these you may or may not have heard of. That's really our residential targeted technical assistance. So we'll come out for an hour and a half, run through your system with you, you know, do some efficiency tests, check for leaks, help you program controllers, talk irrigation with you. The large landscape program is similar, but we're working with the Parks Department. We're working with the schools, the school district, excuse me. We're working with large commercial customers, churches, etc. And we're really partnering with them throughout an entire irrigation season, tracking water use against water budgets, doing infield projects, you know, installing soil sensors and monitoring irrigations to try to help them manage large amounts of water. The water waste prevention program, part of what we do is water waste enforcement. It's not the most fun part of our job, but it's part of what we need to do. So that's, you know, making sure people adhere to our Bend water use code. So it's not hard to find, unfortunately, but, you know, runoff into the streets, watering days and hours, making sure leaks in service lines or plumbing is fixed within 10 days. So all those things are things we're looking at seasonally and trying to help get resolved to kind of balance demands, reduce demands on our system. Indoor conservation, we really shift to that in the winter. So we give out free indoor kits. We do Fix a Leak Week events to try to help people address indoor conservation, because during those winter months, your winter quarter average, which affects your sewer bill for the rest of the year, they're looking at those December, January, February months to determine your sewer bill. So, you know, practicing conservation, making sure leaks are fixed in those winter months will really help you throughout the rest of the year. And then the educational outreach, you know, a lot of conservation programs, that's all they do. They hand out pamphlets, they, you know, send emails and things like that. That's a large part of what we do, but it's not all we do. So we try to reach out to the green industry. We hold winter workshops for them to get their continued education credits for their licenses. We do public workshops, usually in the spring and summer for homeowners. We'll have one of those coming up here in June at Hollands Head Park. The home water use reports is basically it's a water use synopsis that we email out to customers every month, just showing them how their water use compares, notifying them events we have, etc. And then, you know, working on guides and publications, you know, to help educate folks and give them some resources to look to if they're trying to take on a project themselves. So like I said, with the measurement, you know, having all that water use data, we can really measure the effectiveness of our programs, you know, before and after interventions. And so this year, we've had a large interest in the sprinkler inspection program. We're booked almost all the way through August right now with 200 inspections. We wanted to offer it and open it early just because of the drought and give folks, the opportunity to have some additional resources this year. Typically, we didn't open that until about June. We're doing more proactive patrol on the water waste. So we've got staff out there kind of being community ambassadors, talking with commercial customers preemptively to try to just let people know that we're looking for this and try to avoid, giving people the possibility of incurring a fine because that's not necessarily what we want to lead with. But, that is some leverage we have. So yeah, lots of outreach. Some of the things we do, again, the publications, partnering with our large water users, including ourselves, all our city-owned right-of-ways. We partner with our transportation and mobility department, who's in charge of maintaining those right-of-ways, to try to help them manage water. I think we've got over 130 or 140 sites of our own. And each of those have multiple controllers and things to manage. So we're trying to wrap our arms around our own systems so we can lead by example and not, just be telling everybody else to do a good job. And then, again, just back to the data, we use water budgets. So this, gets back to kind of Molly's question. So we generate a water budget based off of, plant material, the size of a lot, the composition of a landscape, and some other environmental factors, some weather data, things like that, to give us a baseline water need for different size properties. So we're comparing apples to apples. We're not comparing, a townhome to an Aubrey Butte home. And this helps us when we look at, who's over this water budget. We're not talking to people that, are maybe 1,000 gallons over. We're talking to people that are like 400 times over their water budget, right? So there's some conservation potential there. There's really, something going on that hopefully we can help them rectify, and that reduces demands, that helps us stretch our sources longer and farther into the future. And it helps the customer, right? They're not paying a water bill for water that they don't need to use. And then, we're able to report on that. So, in 3 years, that program has saved almost 14 million gallons. And that's something that we've actually measured before and after. So that's why it ends up being one of our baseline programs. Here's an example of kind of, how we use a water budget. So this would be like for a large landscape customer. You can kind of see the solid shaded portion of that, how you kind of have a bell curve as you go through the summer and temperatures increase, and that water need of the landscape kind of ebbs and flows, right? And what we want to see is that dotted line mimic that, right? Every time it goes over that line, they're putting down too much water. Every time it dips under that line, you are underwatering and that plant starts to stress. And so typically what we see if someone's under budget is soon after you'll see a giant spike, because now you've seen adverse effects in the plant material and now you're overwatering to catch up. So if what we try to do is put the information in front of them that helps them realize what's going on. And then secondly, we look at, the maintenance practices or the irrigation efficiency to figure out, okay, what's going to allow us to hug that line a little bit tighter. And so if you look at, just the two graphs in the scale of the second year, they still had a little bit of overage, towards the end of the season. But the scale of the water use was a lot less, right? So that's what we're hoping to achieve working with our large customers. And then I mentioned home water reports. So that's one on the left. So that's an email, they get a comparison of their water usage from previous years. We used to compare household to household or to their neighbor. and we got a lot of negative feedback. No one likes to be shamed, and I don't blame them. So we just did a personal comparison of how they're using water, and then we do customized messages and the rest of that email to kind of let them know what's going on with the city, what's going on with our program, and maybe some helpful hints. And that's all done through our Water Smart program. So if you're not familiar with that, it's basically a software that works with our water meters that gives you hourly water use data. It gives you suggestions on how to conserve. It tells you where you use most of your water, but it also gives you leak alerts. So you can set high use notifications or leak alerts. Let's say you left on vacation and you want to know or be alerted if there's unexpected water use, or a high, maybe something breaks while you're gone and you want to be notified. That system lets you customize that, and it'll notify you in your email or cell phone. So it's a really great tool, and it's free to our water customers. So if you haven't checked that out, I would encourage you to look at that. Here's just I'm going to show this slide. This is kind of an effect of conservation. So we had a source article that came out a couple weeks ago before Earth Day, and I made a comment that our peak water use hadn't changed or had actually gone down, and it's true. But I met, I was talking with people at our Earth Day fair, and some lady called me out and said, "You're full of baloney. How could that be with all this development and that sort of thing?" And I totally get it. And as I explained it to her, she said, "Oh, okay, well, why don't you guys tell people this information?" And I said, "Well, we do, but not everybody's scouring the internet to find out our water production numbers." And so I thought I just, kind of preface it here. The graph to the left that shows kind of the 24, 23 numbers, that's our peak day demands. So that's our highest production day of the year. It's usually July or August. And that's one of the benchmarks we use to see, because it affects our infrastructure, right? So if our peak day demands get way out of control to where we can't refill reservoirs, or our supplies are so low that we can't refill reservoirs, that we can't meet fire flow, we're in big trouble, right? Especially in the summer, in fire season and that sort of thing. So that's one of the benchmarks we look at internally. And if you look at that, you can see that for the past 3 years, we've been below where we were in 2008 and 2009. Some of those things are attributed to conservation. Some of those are attributed to how we produce water or measure water. Obviously, there's some, the recession in there that will influence some of those numbers. But that shows us that we're holding pretty steady, and despite growth, we're doing pretty well. And part of that is affected by what we call our per capita demands, right? So how much water we use as a household or per person is another metric. So that's kind of what that misspelled annual average gallons per day is to the right. And so this is a 12-month average of all our customers, commercial, single family, multifamily, of how many gallons per day we use indoors and outdoors. And so you can see, the 2020 12-month, we were, I think, at like 320 or 321 gallons per day. In 2021, we dropped down to around 290. And this is a 3-month average, because we're just barely into 2022. So this is a lot of winter use affecting this number here. But these are the kind of things that we track to see, how effective, where we need, more investment in our programs, and which customers we need to be talking to. And then these are some new things that are coming out of our water master plan. So our water master plan basically told us, as we integrated conservation, if we invested 20 million in conservation over the next 20 years, that we would save 11 million in infrastructure. We would be able to offset 2 wells and a reservoir. So, which was great. We were excited to hear that. Now the hard part is implementing that, right? So a few of the things we're doing this year, we're rolling out some rebates. So we measured over, gosh, we started with like 150 measures. We whittled them down to, I think, about 20. So we looked at, what was the effect of a turf removal program? What was the effect of a toilet replacement program? We looked at numerous measures and we picked basically the top 11 that had the greatest cost benefit for the customer and for the utility. And so we came out with 11 measures. One of those being an ordinance for private development. So that's one area. We have it for our city engineering projects. In 2017, we revised our standards. So if you look at like Empire or 14th Street or Murphy Road, you'll see a shift in landscape type, in irrigation type. And that's really due to those engineering standards. We want to do the same thing for private development. So really shaping how we develop in the city of Bend. And part of that, is looking at utilized landscape areas, so these street strip areas. We held off on the turf replacement program for now, because until we start developing without those there, we didn't want to keep building houses that way and then be paying people to take the turf out that just got installed. That wasn't economically savvy or the right way to go. So we're going to work through the ordinance first. We're working on that this summer and through the fall. And in the meantime, we're looking at rebates on equipment. And we're also partnering with a local group, the Pollinator Pathways Group, on converting the turf strips to native pollinator plants to create habitat corridors, obviously lower water use, and bring in efficient irrigation to those areas. So you'll see a couple pilot sites. We're going to tackle some of our right-of-ways around OSU and Chandler this summer. And we'll be working with a select group of folks, a couple commercial sites and a few residential sites to kind of pilot that program and see what we can learn as far as water savings for that. So we may continue that program as a staple, depending on what we find out. But that's something new we're going to try this year. And that's all I got. Thank you guys for hanging in there while I talked. But I'm happy to take any questions if anybody has any.
Yeah, Dan, that was awesome. Thank you so much. That's so exciting. One question, kind of going back to precipitation. Precipitation numbers don't really take into account that it comes in as snow versus rain, or that significant snowpack has melted early. If things are recalibrated for what is left in the mountains, do you know what that number would be?
The closest I could get would be the snow water equivalent. I mean, that's how they're looking at what's potentially going to end up in the aquifer or the rivers. It really depends on what happens in the next month or so, right? I mean, how fast that snow melts. I think total precipitation, like I said, I think we were at 97% of median. So that gets us close. The problem is we've been in drought for 3 years now. So even if we got 100% this year, we're still not caught up from the last 2 years.
Right.
So my guess is, we'll still see low stream flows come June and July. Again, I'm not the hydrology expert, but we are looking at that, even with our own sources, looking at our wells, looking at our surface water, and even though we got this great storm, we might get to a point of curtailment within the city of Bend this year. So that's something we're preparing for. And again, I don't know if Rod's jumped on yet, but we stay in touch with water operations, and those decisions are made based off of what their data is telling them, and then we move forward with those sorts of things.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
We have a lot of people in our neighborhood that water in the afternoon. You mentioned enforcement. Is
Yeah.
that just something that there isn't enough people to cover?
No, not necessarily. So we've got a few things. The proactive patrols, obviously, we're not going to catch everybody because we're not doing that for 8 hours. We do have a reporting feature if you go to our website where you can just, if you see something like that, that helps us, right? Unfortunately, we see it everywhere. And most of the times, I would say it's pretty easy to remedy. If we see something like that, usually a call to the customer, hey, were you aware we had watering hours? We had this report. Usually it gets remedied pretty quick. Honestly, there's sometimes where it doesn't. Sometimes we'll have one waterways case that drags on for months. And whether it be, we're working through a property manager to an owner or what have you, sometimes they take longer than others. We do have the option to just go straight to the fine. The fine is a civil infraction. I think it's a Class B infraction. It's $450 a day.
Woof.
So when we were looking at that, and then the feasibility of, well, why is this violation occurring, right? Is it something where they don't know how to use the controller, they're waiting for a landscaper to get back and change it or to make a repair, or they don't have a landscaper and they're not sure how to repair it? And then so we thought, well, the whole socioeconomic issue of, well, if they can't afford to make the repair and we're throwing a $450 a day fine at them, is that helping? And so we decided that we'd rather go through the education and outreach. And unfortunately, that's not always what people respond to, right? So one of the things that came out of the Environmental Climate Committee this year was they said, well, Dan, you have code, so you better enforce it. And so, it realistically, it could get there, especially if we go into curtailment. It'll be more of the go-to, leading with the stick. Like I said, for now, we're trying to do the preemptive kind of, community engagement of just showing up and being around town more. We'll see how that works for us. But certainly if you guys see it around town, that's a helpful way for us to follow up on it, because we can't see all of them. We get calls, we see it on our own as we're driving through town on appointments. So that does help us respond to those though.
And unfortunately, not everyone is a City of Bend water customer. That's
right.
That's what half of our neighborhood is. Like you just made us all jealous that we don't have City of Bend water. I'm on Avion, and so that gets a little bit kind of confusing there. If there is a water waster out there, but they're not a City of Bend customer, like right. You're probably not going to spend your time, talking to those folks, perhaps.
Yeah, part of the benefit, I think, of being connected to the green industry is a lot of times we'll know the landscaper, and so we can just reach out to them and say, hey guy, or hey, it's never Molly, I'm not calling Molly, but whoever it is, hey, who's running that midday cycle out there or whatever it is. But you're exactly right, Molly. It's I think within our UGB, the City of Bend only serves 75% of the population. So we have Avion, Roats, Swally, irrigation districts that do not have necessarily these rules. And so we'll literally have, a City of Bend customer on one side of the street and an Avion customer on the other side.
Right. I was just looking at the water map before this meeting, and I think about half of our neighborhood is at least half is Avion, a good portion of it, the east and south side. So that's kind of tough. A couple more questions here in the chat. Do you have any comparative data for different landscape designs for single water family use, like more water usage on single family homes with different types of landscapes? Like if they have more of a native landscape versus a lawn heavy landscape. Do you have any data on those, that usage?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think, it's going to vary obviously on the size of the landscape, but I think we worked it out. Well, here's a quick one. So where we're talking pollinator pathways, this is just because it's top of mind. We have, on average street strip is approximately 250 to 300 square feet in front of your home. If you're watering it with turf and you switch over to, a pollinator or a native pollinator friendly garden on higher efficiency irrigation, you can save 5,000 gallons of water a year, right? That's just on one little strip. I think if we were looking at like 1,000 square feet of landscape, I think you're close to like 15,000 gallons a year for your traditional cool season turf to maintain that 1,000 square feet. Because I think it's about 15 gallons per square foot for cool season turf that you need a year. For that same 1,000 square feet of natives, you're closer to like, I want to say it was like around 4,000 gallons. So we do have that data. That's the best I got off the top of my head, but
Sure. Yeah, fair enough. Thanks. Are there any plans to reduce water usage on the per capita demands?
Absolutely. That's one thing, especially as we talk with like our peers in Redmond and Prineville. We were just talking about that actually the other day of everybody's looking at development, looking at growth. And that's one of the things that's going to help us grow, right? So we don't want to drill new wells. Number one, there is no new water to be had. Number two, adding sources, if you can find one, doesn't solve your demand problem, right? It's just meeting the problem. So that is something that we look at as a reduction or a goal to reduce. So that could be influenced by, the landscape ordinance, hopefully, right? If we're building homes to use less water to begin with, building footprints, and then helping folks with existing landscapes make those conversions or the upgrades to higher efficiency equipment. So that's the hope of, the rebates to kind of incentivize that. But yes, that's a goal of ours. Yeah.
One more question here in the chat. Even though municipal use is in the single digit of the percentage, I think this is of the Deschutes Basin, would savings here benefit the in-stream flow and help our local river ecosystem?
That's a good question. And that's a complicated question. So yes and no, right? So obviously, if we were able to take less surface water, that's going to help downstream. The problem with the way things are set up with water rights is the next person downstream has the right to whatever's left over. So if we took less of our surface water, that next water right holder, that irrigation district that's downstream of us, has the right to all that water. So it doesn't necessarily equate to wet water in the stream. There's things that are going to help that. The water bank for sure is going to help that, right? Because you're decentivizing using that right when you don't need to. And so that's letting them not have to use their full right every year, which is part of the problem. But yeah, and then again, when you're talking about, obviously, human consumption is important, right? The beneficial use to a farmer and to us, that's an argument to be had. But if we're using water as efficiently as we can, there are ecosystem benefits to a landscape. There's mental health benefits, there's cooling effects. We don't want, heat islands. And there's water quality effects, right? Trees, plants filter water that goes back into our groundwater. So we want to keep landscapes. We want to keep water for human consumption, for growing food. We just have to find a balance to do it all.
Yeah, great, Dan, thanks. Do you have any suggestions how we could approach Avion to say, hey, City of Bend is setting a great example? How can we get them on board? I've already had the backflow testing questions, but starting there. Yeah, any suggestions on how to talk to those folks?
So we are above my pay grade, but we are having talks with them as franchisees about conservation and the difficulties as we grow, not just in as perception wise, but the ability to serve those people into the future. Obviously, we looked at a 20-year span on our infrastructure and our sources, but you have all these short-term variables within that, right? So climate affects that. Things that you can't engineer your way out of necessarily, right? So these are things we've got to be prepared to adapt to. So one of the things that, and this isn't public knowledge, but we are approaching them of like, well, hey, what if we ran your conservation program and you just had us do it for you, right? Would you be okay with that? We'll see how it goes. I don't really have a definitive answer for you right now, but there's conversations being had like that.
Okay, no, that's fair enough. That's great. Thanks.
Sure.
Yeah, I think I've got all the questions addressed in the chat.
Okay.
If anyone else wants to turn off their screen and ask their question in person, or any thoughts or anything there?
I have a question. So what is there any incentive for Avion to encourage conservation? Because they make more money when they sell more water. Is there an incentive for them to conserve?
Not in the short term, but in the long term, sure, right? If they want to serve more customers, the farther they can spread that water out, yeah. But again, that's getting into their rate model and their business, so I can't speak for them. But in my mind, if I wanted to grow as a utility, I would consider that as growth possibilities.
Well, it was interesting to me because, of course, we get a utility bill because of sewer from the city, and comparing what we get from Avion to what we get from the city in terms of information is quite different. And there just is absolutely nothing on their webpage that says anything about conservation or incentive to do that. So it's such an interesting issue with, all the issues we have in this area with water that Avion seems almost oblivious to it. So,
yeah. I'm an Avion customer as well. So I understand. I did see some things come out last year. They sent us a bill stuffer with watering hours on it. One thing that we can do as far as the water waste enforcement, the runoff. If you see runoff, if it's a city-owned right-of-way, it doesn't matter the water purveyor. We can follow up on that. We just can't enforce the days or the hours because that's their purview. So,
and of course, if we change the ordinance about, landscape along the city right-of-ways and things like that, that's going to apply no matter where people get their water.
Yep. So that would be any development within the city UGB. Yep.
Okay. Very good. Are there any other questions out there? If you want to just chime in.
Yeah,
My name's Rebecca, and I'm sorry my camera doesn't seem to be working this evening. I just want to follow up on the overall snowpack water received, because this is always confusing to me. And I'm going to talk in general numbers here, but if we receive 16 feet of snow and whatever the water equivalent is in December, January, but half of that melted and is already downriver into the ocean, how can we possibly count that towards the available water for the summer?
Because, well, again, I don't want to get over my skis. I'm not the hydrologist, but some of that is going to be, obviously surface runoff, which would go into the rivers. But some of that's going to infiltrate into the groundwater too. And we consider that groundwater recharge as a source as well. So that's where I was talking about kind of that slow melt is what we hope for. And like to your point, we had the early storms in December where we got a majority of our snowpack, and then you had 80 degrees a month ago. So yeah, you're going to have that ebb and flow of what's left on the mountains, but some of that recharges into the aquifer, and that's what we hope for is the slow melt, the slow recharge. We don't do a whole bunch of measurement on that snowpack other than monitoring our wells and our groundwater levels and what we're seeing in surface water. So we measure that at various different points as we divert the water and as we look at water in our well system. That's about all I could tell you. And you're going to see fluctuations from year to year too. So we've seen groundwater fluctuations based off of climate, right? It's not drastic, but again, it's a dynamic aquifer, right? It recharges and flows out by Crooked River, and some of that goes to the ocean. But it's a large, massive aquifer. It's like, I think like 2,000 feet deep in some spots. So again, every bit of that snowpack counts. I can't speak to what that means in water, but they like the SNOTEL and NOAA and the Oregon Department of Water, they look at that water year total as total precipitation, whether that's rain, snow, what have you. A majority of ours is in the snow. So, sorry, I don't know if that answers your question, but
Well, it always is lauded like, oh gosh, we have 133% of normal, so we must be okay.
yeah.
But that's kind of not the way it should be. It's like there's some it seems like it requires a hydrologist to take a look at how much was rain, how much was snow, how much went down the river already, how much recharged.
Yeah.
And the public is left with we must be okay because we're over 100%, as opposed to the real answer was, we're still in deficit spending, so we really shouldn't be watering our lawns.
Right. And that slide was not meant to, I guess, infer that we had no problem. It was just to show that, those latest storms added to that precip. But that's where I caveated that year range. So so every so often they shift that year that they're looking at, or that time period that they're looking at for that median number, right? And so if you look at 1991 through 2021, we've had a lot more dry years in that time period. And so that median doesn't mean the same thing as what it did, prior to that, right? So that's kind of why I hinted at the dates, so it looks nice. It looks like we're good. And certainly if every year from now on repeated that, we'd be in a lot better shape. But yeah, sorry, that was more just to give you an update on what's happened, not to cause us a false sense of security or anything like that.
Oh, thanks for the explanation.
Yeah. Sure.
Are there any other questions out there? Okay, thank you very much for a absolutely fascinating presentation. If you'll stop sharing your screen, we'll have a little follow-up here of kind of wrapping things up. If there are any questions that people have related to anything other than what we've talked about tonight, this would be a good time to bring it up. And then other than that, we'll close early. It looks like we're a little bit ahead of our game, so that's okay too.
Yeah, I want to just say thanks, Dan. That was really just awesome. I'm all jazzed up to, do my part, and but it's kind of looking at that big picture that water conservation takes all of us, and so really that education piece and just reaching out to people. And I know it's a long day, so to do these types of presentations in the evening, we really appreciate your time here. So thank you so much.
No, thank you guys for having us. We're happy to do this. I see Rod's on there. Rod joined us, so thanks for being here, Rod. Yeah, anytime.
Any other questions about anything for the board?
Oh,
All right.
I could say quick that I did put some of these fire and water resources on our webpage, so you can go and look, under the links at the top, and there's resources, and there was a few more that were brought up tonight, so I'll make sure to add those so we have a little bit more kind of specific information that we got tonight, and to share those links. So and get that sprinkler inspection program link on there, and yeah, share that.
All right.
Very good.
Hey, Dan, I have one question. That awesome graphic with where the water comes from,
Mhm.
is that available somewhere on the city website? I love that graphic of kind of where our water comes from and where it flows through.
Yeah, I think if you go to our city website, we have a spot under the utility department website that's called educational resources,
Okay,
the tab, and they have a journey, your water journey through Bend, I believe.
okay.
And so it's a bunch of information we put together for kind of one of our school programs, but I believe it's got that image on there.
Okay, great, super. So I can utilize that. That would make a really fun, like, social media post just to inform people about their water.
Mhm.
Super, thank you.
Sure. All right, everybody. Have a good night.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
So I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat, and I'm not hearing a great roar out there of people speaking up. So I think we're going to call this a meeting. And thank you for everybody who participated. And certainly we appreciate all those wonderful talks that were presented by the city folks. And so we are not having a board meeting this month. We will have our next board meeting on our usual schedule, the third Monday of June. And we'll post our agenda ahead of time. And so in the meantime, if you have any questions, feel free to contact us, and have a good rest of your evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
And you can